Once again, welcome to video number 27, our readings through 1st and 2nd Samuel, now the Tuesday of Holy Week. Where we left off, there had been continued instability under the kingship of David. However, as chapter 21 was coming to a conclusion, David with Israel was able to defeat their arch enemy, the Philistines, and so we left wondering, is David going to get it back? We realize that the pages are getting thin now, almost to the conclusion. We've seen more scandal now during his kingship and his rule than we've seen success. We saw success in his early life, but a lot of failures since he became king. Is he going to get it back? Well, here in chapter 22, there's a poem. It's a hymn. It's a song. It's about his life that has been lived full of enemies, including Saul, various members of the Philistines, his own son, others within his house. You could go far and wide for the enemies of David. And this poem, this hymn, is something of a refrain of his life. It reminds us of his history. It reminds us of 1st and 2nd Samuel, our entire readings. But perhaps more importantly, theologically, it reminds us that David is still God's, that all of these various things that we are to consider here, that David had encountered all these enemies, that God delivered him, and so he is God's. And so we read through this poem, and perhaps I should have looked at it. There's nothing like the poetic King James English, even if some of the translation has been approved upon. I was delivered from my enemies. The waves of death engulfed me. The currents of chaos surrounded me. The ropes of Sheol tightened me. The snares of death trapped me. I called out to God, and from his heavenly temple, he heard my voice. The earth began to shake, and here comes God in his deliverance, and the battle cry of God, and he was there. And so he goes on to say, I've obeyed the Lord's commands. I haven't rebelled against God. I was blameless before him. I kept from sinning. And we get the idea that, yes, that this was written earlier. This was something that he returned back to many times in his life, but he was certainly blameless early in his life, and not later in his life. But here is some of the richest poetry within Scripture, and it reminds me of Psalm 119. One of the things that I haven't done during this study, because it's been broader than David, albeit even so, it's still a significantly does revolve around the rise of David. One thing I haven't done is examine the Psalms, which are also very rich and coincide with many of these events. All right, so anyway, moving forward now into chapter number 23. These are the final words of David. And so it's his benediction, his final words. He is winding down. He's attesting to what God has done, attesting that his dynasty, his kingship is something that is going to be perpetual and is going to continue on through David's household. And this is what he's reflecting on And then we read about David's warriors, and once again they are fighting Philistines and are winning. And so there's some positives here as we're coming into the final turn. He's won some victories over over the Philistines, their arch enemy. There's this poetic language. He's here. He's fighting the Philistines. They're the enemies, the Philistines. David wants a drink from the well of Bethlehem, his hometown village, and his men go through the enemy lines to get him some water from the well of his home village. And in those ancient times, there's bacterias in every bit of water. But growing up in a certain community, as David did in Bethlehem, your body becomes immune to its own local water. The water tastes right to you, where going to another well, that water might not taste right. And what David wanted was just some water that felt like home, that tasted like home. And they go and they get it for him. And what does he do? He's not going to be stingy. Instead, he pours it out as a drink offering to God. And so David, he's looking more and more commendable here. But there's one more chapter. Let's see how it ends. We'll go through that one chapter on the next video, which it'll be less content, but yet it'll still be just as significant, if not more so. This is how it all concludes. And also in the next video, I'm going to address perhaps some questions that you've given me by text or phone call or via email, or some things that you've asked for me to address, and try to synthesize somewhat everything that we have walked through over now these last few weeks as we've read 1st and 2nd Samuel. So if you have any input, anything for me to consider for the next video, get your messages to me much sooner than later. And with that, this video will be a little shorter now, and I'll meet you tomorrow at the finale.